It all started with a phone call I almost didn't answer. My husband, Paul, was out on one of his work retreats, those 2-day golf and scotch affairs with the partners from his firm that I'd long since stopped asking too many questions about. I was alone at home, padding around the kitchen in my robe, swirling a glass of Pinot I'd opened more out of boredom than thirst, when my phone buzzed across the granite counter. "Hey, Evelyn." It took me a second. The voice was familiar but older, deeper than I remembered. I stared at the screen. Liam. The name hit me like a ripple across the years. Liam was my stepbrother, though that word barely scratched the surface. Our parents had married when I was 25, long past the point of needing to be raised together. By then, I was already a year into my first marriage, and Liam had just gotten out of the Navy. We saw each other at holidays, barbecues, a few Thanksgivings. He was handsome in a way that didn't fade, all lean muscle and sunburnt shoulders, with a crooked grin that made women look twice even when he wasn't trying. We hadn't talked in years. "Liam?" I said, setting the wine down, suddenly aware of the way the silk of my robe clung to my thighs.
"Yeah."
"It's been a while, huh?" His laugh was low and easy. "Listen, I'm passing through Richmond for a few days. Thought I'd see if you wanted to grab a coffee or something." I hesitated. Something about the sound of his voice loosened a knot I hadn't realized was coiled inside me.
"Sure."
Why not? We met at a cafe near the canal walk the next afternoon. He was even more handsome than I remembered, salt beginning to streak his temples, laugh lines around those blue-gray eyes, and that same effortless confidence. He wore a navy t-shirt that hugged his chest, and jeans that did nothing to hide the way his body had stayed firm. 52, and still able to make a room tilt slightly when he entered. We hugged.
"Too long, maybe."
His arms were strong, and the press of his chest against mine sent a flicker of warmth down my spine I tried to dismiss. This was Liam, my stepbrother. Sort of. "I can't believe you still look the same," he said, eyes lingering just a beat too long as we sat down. I laughed. "Well, my knees crack when I stand up, and I can't eat pasta after 7 p.m. anymore, but thanks." We talked for hours. About everything. His job now in logistics consulting, his divorce 3 years back, my life with Paul, glossed over, polished to a shine. I didn't mention the loneliness that hung over me like fog, or the way Paul barely looked up from his phone when I entered a room these days. The next day, we met for lunch, then dinner, then drinks. He was staying at a hotel downtown, and when he asked if I wanted to come up for a nightcap, I didn't say no. I told myself I just wanted to talk more, that it was innocent. But the room smelled like his cologne, something musky and expensive. He poured us both a drink and sat on the edge of the bed, one ankle crossed over his knee. I stood by the window, heart thumping in my chest like a teenager's. "You know," he said, eyes catching the light, "I always wondered about you." I turned. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, took a sip. "Back then, you were married, and I was, well, an idiot. But you were always beautiful, Evie. I never really thought of you like a sister." There it was. The moment I could still have left. Instead, I took a step toward him. "You're not really my brother," I said, softer than I intended. "No," he said, setting his glass down, voice low and rough. "I'm not." We kissed. It started slow, tentative, like both of us were testing something that had lived between us, unsaid, for too long. But the second his hands slid into my hair and pulled me closer, something inside me broke free. His mouth was warm and urgent, tasting of whiskey and desire. I let my robe fall. He stared, hungrily, reverently, and pulled me onto the bed. What followed was the kind of lovemaking I hadn't felt in years. Not just sex. That had become routine with Paul, functional like laundry or taxes. This was something else. Liam took his time, as if learning every part of me again, or maybe for the first time. He whispered things in my ear that made me ache. He ran his hands along the curve of my back, like it was sacred. When he moved inside me, slow at first and then deeper, fuller, I gasped, loud enough for the neighbors if they cared. After, we lay tangled in the sheets, our bodies sticky and breath still shallow. I shouldn't have come here, I whispered into the crook of his shoulder. But you did, he said, running a finger along my thigh. And I'm not sorry. I wasn't either.
Not in that moment.
Later, when I went home, Paul was already in bed, snoring lightly, the TV flickering against his closed eyelids. I showered quietly, scrubbing away the smell of Liam's cologne, but not the memory of how he made me feel.
Alive. Desired. New.
It wasn't supposed to happen again. But of course it did. The next morning, there was a message on my phone.
I can't stop thinking about last night.
Can I see you again? I told myself no. I even typed it. But I deleted the message before I hit send. I didn't answer Liam's message right away. I told myself I needed time to think, to breathe, to remember who I was and what I'd done. I kept busy the next morning, laundry, cleaning out the fridge, walking around Target for 45 minutes without buying anything. But by late afternoon, I'd reread his message more times than I cared to admit.
I can't stop thinking about last night.
Can I see you again? My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure if I wanted to say yes or no, or if I even knew the difference anymore. In the end, I didn't answer with words. I showed up. His hotel was quiet in the late afternoon. I wore sunglasses, a scarf, like a ridiculous cliché. My heart thudded in my chest as I rode the elevator to the 7th floor. Part of me still believed I'd turn around, that I'd knock and then apologize and walk away and forget this ever started. But when the door opened and I saw him standing there, shirtless, barefoot, his eyes surprised and hungry, I didn't say anything. I stepped inside, dropped my purse to the floor, and kissed him like I hadn't spent the last 18 years pretending I didn't want this. That time, we didn't speak for a long while. We were rougher, bolder. He pulled me toward the bed with urgency, like he'd been thinking about this every minute since the last time. I wrapped my legs around his waist, moaning into his mouth, clawing at his back as if I needed to anchor myself. When he slid inside me, it was with a growl, one hand at my throat, not choking, just holding, possessive, carnal. I arched beneath him, aching, trembling, alive. We collapsed afterward, panting, the room smelling of sweat and skin and guilt. I lay on my side, fingers tracing the edge of his collarbone. "What are we doing?" I whispered. He didn't answer right away. His hand slid down my back, resting just above the curve of my hip. Something we probably should have done years ago. I rolled onto my back, staring at the ceiling. "You make it sound romantic." He chuckled. "I make it sound true." That night, I told Paul the first was going to dinner with a friend from my book club. He barely looked up from his laptop. "Don't wait up," I said. He didn't. Liam and I started meeting in odd places. Hotels at first, then a rented Airbnb near the river. Sometimes we met in his rental car, parked behind the old drive-in theater that had been closed for years. The secrecy, the thrill of it, became a part of the appeal. I'd slip out during Paul's golf weekends, or invent errands that kept me out of the house for hours. I bought new lingerie. I started doing my hair again, putting on lipstick. It wasn't for Paul. It hadn't been for him in a long time. One afternoon, Liam and I had met for lunch at a little hole-in-the-wall diner just off the interstate. Nothing romantic, just burgers and sweet tea, sitting in a booth like two ordinary people with no shared shame. But the moment our knees touched beneath the table, everything shifted. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said, voice low. I swallowed. "It's getting harder to pretend I'm not waiting for this." He looked at me like he wanted to devour me. "I want to be the one who undoes you. Not once a week in secret. All the time." "Don't say that." "Why not?" "Because I might start believing you." That afternoon, we went back to the Airbnb. He didn't even get my dress off at first, just pushed it up, my underwear pulled aside, his hands under my thighs, lifting me against the wall with an urgency that made my knees weak. I bit his shoulder to keep from crying out too loudly. He kissed me with fire, held me like I was his, and when we finally collapsed onto the bed, clothes half on, skin flushed and bruised with love marks, I knew it wasn't just lust. Something was changing. But outside that room, my life was a neatly kept lie. I kept cooking dinner for Paul, folding his socks, smiling politely at his partners at charity events. No one suspected a thing. I'd perfected the role of the good wife over decades, and I wore it like a tailored coat, even when it no longer fit. Still, the guilt would creep in late at night, especially on the evenings when Paul actually noticed me. One night, we were watching some mindless show on Netflix, and he reached over and placed his hand on my knee. Just that. A quiet gesture. But it made me flinch. He didn't notice. I excused myself, locked myself in the bathroom, and stared at myself in the mirror. What was I doing? Was I falling in love with Liam? Or was I just falling out of love with the version of myself I'd been pretending to be for too long? It didn't help that Liam had started talking about staying longer, about maybe finding a short-term lease in town. Just for a while, he'd said casually one morning while making us coffee in the Airbnb kitchen. "I've got some flexibility now. I can work remotely." He looked so domestic, barefoot in jeans, pouring cream into my cup like this was something we did every day. Wouldn't that complicate things? I asked, taking the mug. Too late for that. I wanted to be angry with him, to tell him he was being reckless. But the truth was, the idea of him staying made my chest ache in a way I couldn't define. I wanted him close. I wanted to wake up tangled in sheets with him, not sneak off like a teenager avoiding curfew. But I also didn't want to be the woman who left a marriage of 18 years because of an affair with her stepbrother. Except maybe I already was. One night, after another long evening together, Liam reached out as I was dressing and touched my wrist. "Stay." I hesitated. "Paul's out of town," he added. "Isn't he?" I nodded. "Then stay."
So I did.
We ordered Thai food and ate it in bed, legs entwined, mouth sticky with chili and kisses. We watched old black and white movies until the screen blurred. He curled against me, tracing slow circles along my spine with his fingertips, whispering memories we'd never shared. And somewhere in that blur of midnight and comfort and heat, I let myself believe this wasn't wrong. That this was the life I should have had. That night, I dreamt of Liam, not just his body, but his laugh, his voice, the smell of him on my skin. When I woke, I was in his arms. The morning sun poured through the blinds, and for one dangerous second, I forgot the rest of my life existed. Then my phone buzzed. It was Paul. "Flight got canceled. I'll be home around noon instead. Want anything?" I stared at the message, the lie already forming in my throat. But Liam's arms tightened around me, and I knew this was only going to get harder. When I pulled into our driveway that morning, the sun was already too bright. It always felt too clean, too unforgiving after a night like that. I sat in the car for a long moment, breathing slowly, touching the indent Liam's stubble had left on the inside of my thigh. My skin still smelled like him, sweat, soap, sex, and the ache between my legs was sweet and maddening. But inside the house, everything snapped back to normal. Paul was in the kitchen, already halfway through the crossword and nursing his usual bitter coffee. "Everything okay?" he asked without looking up.
"Fine," I said.
"Just didn't sleep well." He nodded, barely registering me. I showered in silence, scrubbing my skin until it was red, but nothing could rinse the way Liam had whispered mine into my ear. The way his breath had tickled the back of my neck just before I came. I made dinner that night like I always did: salmon, asparagus, quinoa. Something Paul's trainer had recommended 6 months ago. I watched him eat, watched him chew, watched him thank me like it was a habit, not gratitude. My hand shook when I poured the wine. And yet, the more I tried to return to my old rhythms, the more they betrayed me. I started noticing things I'd always ignored. The way Paul didn't really see me when I walked into a room. The way our conversations hovered just above polite, but never deeper. The way he'd touch my shoulder or brush my hand, but never with hunger or meaning. When was the last time he kissed me like he needed to? When was the last time I kissed him at all? Liam stayed in town. He never said it outright, but I knew he was staying for me. He signed a short-term lease in a small, furnished loft not far from downtown. It was bright, open, full of windows and air and potential. The kind of place I could have imagined myself in at 30. Or 50, if things had turned out differently. He called it our space. I laughed at that at first, dismissing it as romantic nonsense, but the more time we spent there, the more it began to feel real. I started leaving things: a sweater, a pair of earrings, my favorite perfume. I'd walk in and he'd already have a glass of wine waiting, jazz playing softly in the background, dinner half prepped. Sometimes we didn't even make it to the kitchen. Sometimes he'd back me against the door the second I walked in, kiss me until my knees buckled, lift me onto the console table with an urgency that felt like hunger and possession and worship all at once. He knew my body better than I did. He knew exactly how to move inside me, how to drag the tip of his tongue along the underside of my breast until I whimpered, how to press his palm between my thighs while whispering filth into my ear until I was begging him to take me anywhere, anyway. There was no pretense with Liam. No performance.
No distrant.
I wasn't just having an affair anymore. I was falling in love.
It terrified me.
But it also made me feel younger than I'd felt in years. One afternoon, we were lying in bed after a particularly long and indulgent rendezvous, my head on his chest, my leg draped over him lazily, his fingers tangled in my hair, when he said it. "I want you to leave him." I stiffened. "I mean it," he said. "I'm not asking for a fantasy. I want this. For real. I want us." My heart stuttered. "You don't know what you're saying."
Ido.
"You've been here, what, a month? Maybe 2. Don't do that. Don't reduce this to timing. You feel it, too." I sat up, pulling the sheet with me. "I have a marriage, Liam. A life. We're not 22.
Exactly.
Which means we know what we want now. And I want you." I stared at him. At the man I'd grown up watching from the periphery of family reunions. At the man who had once been off limits in every possible way and now felt like the only thing that made sense. "But I don't know if I can want this out loud," I said. "Want you out loud."
He reached for my hand.
"You already do." We didn't talk much after that. We made love again, slower, quieter. His mouth moved down my body with reverence, his lips between my legs, so soft, I almost wept. When he entered me again, I clung to him like I was drowning. Because I was. I started dreaming about a different life. Not a wild, scandalous one, but a quieter one. Mornings in the loft. Coffee and laughter. Books shared. A man who touched me with purpose. Who kissed me without obligation. I imagined telling Paul. I tried rehearsing it in my head. "I've met someone else. I've changed."
I'm sorry.
But the words stuck like thorns in my throat. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. One evening, I came home early from Liam's. I wasn't expecting Paul to be in the living room. He was usually golfing late or out with clients. But there he was, holding a box. My scarf was in it. The blue silk one I'd left at Liam's place a week ago. I froze. Paul looked at me with a kind of calm that scared me more than any yelling would have. "I found this in the laundry this morning," he said. "It doesn't smell like our house." I opened my mouth.
Closed it.
"Are you sleeping with someone?" he asked. I could have lied. I could have said it was from the dry cleaner, that I'd spilled something on it, that it was my friend Sharon's and she'd returned it. But I didn't. "Yes," I said quietly. He blinked.
Once.
"For how long?" I sat down. "A couple of months." He exhaled through his nose.
No scouting. No rai.
Just this horrible, suffocating silence. Do I know him? My mouth went dry. I thought about saying no, but I'd already opened the door. "It's Liam." It took a second. I watched it register on his face. The name, the connection. "Your stepbrother?" he said, almost laughing in disbelief.
Technically.
But
Jesus Christ, Ana.
I never planned for this to happen. No one plans this kind of thing. He stood and walked out of the room. I heard the door to his office close. I sat alone for a long time, staring at the empty box. The next few days were unbearable. Paul didn't speak to me unless absolutely necessary.
He didn't yell.
He didn't cry. He just stopped seeing me. And in a strange way, that was worse. I slept in the guest room. I went through the motions. But it was like I'd vanished from the life I'd built. Even my reflection looked like someone else. Liam texted.
Tell me you're okay.
I wasn't, but I wanted to be. I met him that night. I didn't speak when I arrived. I just walked into his arms, pressing my face against his chest, letting the tears come.
He held me for a long time.
Then he pulled back and looked at me with those eyes, steady, warm, wanting. You don't have to go back there, he said. I don't know what I'm doing. Yes, you do. You're just scared. I've never not been someone's wife, I whispered. I don't even know who I am outside of that. He brushed my hair behind my ear. Then let's find out. I didn't go home that night. It wasn't planned. I had a change of clothes in my trunk, a few toiletries in a pouch I kept for emergencies, business trips, overnights at the hospital when my mother was still alive. But I used them now to stay in a loft that smelled like him, where the bed held the shape of us, where the outside world didn't exist unless we invited it in. Liam didn't ask questions. He handed me a glass of wine when I stepped inside and kissed me like I had already made a decision, even if I hadn't. You're here, he said simply. I'm here, I echoed. But my heart was still half somewhere else. The next morning, I sat on the edge of his bed with my phone in my hand for 20 minutes before texting Paul. I won't be home tonight either.
I need space to think.
The reply came hours later. Take what you need.
Just that.
No more. No less. And suddenly, it wasn't just the silence between us that hurt. It was how polite it had all become. Like the final page of a book we were both pretending not to have finished. I spent the next week between two versions of myself. With Liam, I was all breath and skin, hunger and laughter. We cooked together, tangled on the couch, danced barefoot in the kitchen to old Stevie Wonder records. I found myself smiling without noticing, catching my reflection in the window and not recognizing the light in my own eyes. But then I'd return to my car or check my email or sit in a cafe watching couples who looked tired and real and long married, and that part of me, the dutiful wife, the woman who made lists and folded socks and scheduled dentist appointments, would creep back in and whisper, "This isn't your life. This is an escape." One night, Liam caught me staring out the window, my face half reflected in the glass. Tell me where you are, he said softly.
Novere, elite.
Anna. I turned to him. I'm scared I'm not strong enough. For what? To blow it all up. He came behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist. You don't have to set a fire. You just have to walk away from the house that's already empty. I closed my eyes. But even if the house was empty, it was still mine. And then came the dinner. It had been planned weeks before. An anniversary dinner, 22 years of marriage. A table reserved at the restaurant where Paul had proposed. I'd forgotten all about it, but Paul hadn't. He texted that afternoon. Tables at 7:30. I'll be there. You don't have to come. But you should. I stared at the message for a long time. Liam was in the shower, humming something tuneless. I felt guilt rise like bile. I typed, I'll be there. I dressed with hands that trembled. Nothing too suggestive. Nothing too careless. A black blouse with soft sleeves, a pencil skirt, low heels.
No perfume.
I scrubbed Liam's scent from my skin with too much soap. I kissed his temple on the way out. Dinner with Paul? He asked. I nodded. Want me to wait up?
No, I said.
You shouldn't. The restaurant was just as I remembered, dimly lit, too expensive, couples pretending not to check their phones. Paul was already seated, drink in hand. When he stood to greet me, I noticed for the first time how much older he looked. The lines around his mouth, the puffiness beneath his eyes. You look good, he said. You, too. We sat, ordered wine, said all the things two people say when they're buying time. The food arrived. We ate in silence. Halfway through the second glass of wine, Paul cleared his throat. So, him. I stared down at my plate. He makes you happy? He asked. I didn't answer right away. Yes, I finally said. He does. Paul nodded slowly, as if confirming a theory he didn't want to believe. I figured it had to be something big. Something real. You're not the type to throw everything away for a fling. I didn't plan for any of this. No one ever does. We sat quietly again. Then he looked at me and for the first time in weeks really looked. Did you ever love me? I blinked. Paul, I'm serious. I swallowed hard.
Yes, I did.
For a long time. But not anymore. My silence answered him. He looked down, jaw tightening. I could make this difficult, you know. The house. The finances. Everything. I know. But I won't. Not because of you, he added quickly. Because I'd like to be able to look at myself in the mirror when this is over. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes.
I'm sorry, Paul. Truly.
I never wanted to hurt you. He nodded. Then let's try to do this with grace. We didn't hug. We didn't linger. I walked out of that restaurant feeling like my body weighed twice as much as it had going in. But the air outside was clean. Liam was asleep when I got back. Shirtless, arm flung over the edge of the bed. I watched him for a long time before crawling in beside him, curling my body into his. He murmured something incoherent and pulled me close. I told him. I whispered into the dark. He stirred. Told him what? That I'm leaving. He turned, eyes barely open. And he didn't fight it. Liam kissed my shoulder. Then it's done. I didn't answer. Because the truth was it wasn't done. Not really. Ending a marriage wasn't like closing a door. It was more like tearing down a house while still living inside it. The dust, the noise, the confusion. It clung to everything. The next few weeks blurred. I stayed at Liam's most nights. Paul and I began the process logistical, cold, necessary. Dividing accounts. Meeting lawyers. Discussing timelines.
No scouting. No bitterness.
Just unraveling. Friends started calling. Some supportive. Some cautious. Some just nosy. The word stepbrother began to echo in certain circles. I caught it in the tone of their voices, the pauses. I stopped answering most of them. I didn't care. Or at least I told myself I didn't. Liam was my anchor through it all. He cooked when I forgot to eat. He drew me baths when I couldn't sleep. He held me when the tears came, without warning. And he made love to me like I was still whole, even on days I felt like I was splintered into pieces. But cracks began to form. Subtle.
Small.
But real. It started when I found a message on his laptop, open email, unread. From a woman named Marin. The tone wasn't overtly romantic, but it had intimacy. Shared memories. A softness I hadn't seen him offer anyone else.
I didn't ask about it that night.
But it lodged in my mind like a stone. The next week, he mentioned a possible job opportunity in Portland. It's not definite, he said quickly. Just something I was scouted for. I'd turn it down if what? If you ask me to. I looked at him, really looked. At the man I'd risked everything for. At the life we were building out of something messy and broken and real. And for the first time, I wondered, was I enough? Was this enough? Because falling in love is one thing. Staying in it, that's something else entirely. It's strange how quickly a fantasy can become a routine. At first, everything with Liam had felt charged. A touch on the back as I passed him in the kitchen, a glance from across the couch. It had all been electric. But somewhere between the hurried texts and the laundry baskets, between his coffee mug on the counter and my shampoo in his shower, the novelty began to fade. It was replaced by something quieter, steadier, and yet oddly less certain. I started noticing things. How he never turned his phone over when we were together. How he avoided mentioning Marin again, as if my silence about the email had granted him immunity. How sometimes, in moments of distraction, he would look at me with something that wasn't quite guilt, but wasn't comfort, either. I tried not to spiral. I was, after all, the one who had blown up my life, left a husband, walked away from a marriage built over 2 decades. I had no right to demand perfection from the person I'd chosen to fall into. But I started to feel a flicker of something new. Not regret. Not quite. But unease. One afternoon, as I was folding clothes in his bedroom, a small, silly thing, but it made me feel useful, I found an envelope tucked beneath a stack of sweaters. It wasn't hidden exactly, but it also wasn't lying out in the open. Inside were photographs. Printed.
Glossy.
of Liam and a woman I instantly knew was Marin, laughing on a beach, drinking wine on a balcony. A few of them were unmistakably intimate, his arms wrapped around her waist, her mouth on his neck. They weren't dated, but they weren't old either. I slid the envelope back where I found it and sat on the bed, hands trembling. When Liam came home that night, he kissed me as usual, kicked off his shoes, poured us both a glass of wine. I watched him move around the kitchen, so casual, so familiar. It made my stomach twist. "Who's Marin?" I asked finally, my voice too calm. He paused, one hand still on the wine bottle. "She's someone I used to see. Before. Before me. Before us. Yes. She emailed you." "I know. You didn't answer." "I didn't need to. Because you weren't tempted? Or because you were afraid I'd find out?" He looked at me then, really looked. "I wasn't tempted," he said. "But I wasn't ready to explain her to you either." "Explain what?" "That she mattered. Not like you do. Not even close. But she wasn't nothing." I nodded slowly, absorbing it, letting it settle. "Do you still talk?"
No.
"Would you, if I hadn't seen the email?" Silence. It stretched too long. "I don't know," he said eventually. There it was. The truth. Not devastating, but enough. I slept badly that night. Liam reached for me, but I pretended to be asleep. In the morning, he made coffee, left me a note on the counter. "Gone for a run. Back soon. Love you." I stared at the word love. It felt weightless. That afternoon, I went to my old house. Not out of nostalgia, more out of inertia. Paul was there sorting through boxes in the garage. When he saw me, he didn't flinch, just gestured with a tired smile. "I was wondering when you'd come by." I helped him with the boxes. Old Christmas decorations, books we hadn't opened in years, a panini press we used once. It was shockingly easy, this slow unwinding of our life.
No fights. No tears.
Just the gradual acknowledgement that we were no longer each other's person. At one point, he looked at me and said, "Do you love him?" I thought about lying, about softening the blow, but the truth came out instead. "I don't know anymore." He nodded, then surprised me with a half smile. "I don't think you ever did." That hit harder than I expected. We worked in silence after that. On the drive back to Liam's, I took the long route, past the grocery store where I used to shop for Paul, the florist that had once done the centerpieces for our 20th anniversary party, the dry cleaner who used to call me Mrs. Taylor like I was someone that still meant something. I realized I didn't miss the marriage. I missed the version of myself that had felt safe inside it. That night, Liam and I had sex for the first time in days. It was good, technically. He knew my body, knew how to coax me into surrender. But something was missing.
A thread.
A connection. I faked it. Not the orgasm, but the depth. Afterward, I went to the bathroom, turned on the shower, and stood under the hot water until my skin turned red. When I came out, he was asleep. I watched him for a long time, the same way I used to watch Paul, wondering what part of him was still unknowable. The next morning, Marin called. I saw her name flash on his screen. He was in the kitchen, phone left charging on the nightstand. The screen lit up 3 times. Each time, the call rang longer. When he walked in, towel slung around his neck, I didn't hide the phone. "She called," I said. He froze. I didn't answer, I added. He took the phone, turned it off, dropped it face down on the bed. "She's nothing," he said. "I told you. But she's calling. She's probably just trying to get closure." I nodded. "Do you still want me?" I asked. The question hung between us like a challenge. "God, yes," he said. "More than ever." "Then prove it." He stared at me. "Delete her number. Email her. Tell her you've moved on." He hesitated. Just a blink. But I saw it. And that blink, it was enough. I stood up, pulled on my jeans, my bra, my sweater. "Where are you going?" "For a walk." "Anna?" I didn't answer. I drove instead. Nowhere in particular. Just down the highway with the windows cracked, letting the wind slap at my face. I ended up in front of the lake. The same one where Paul had taken me after we bought our first house. We'd eaten sandwiches on a blanket and talked about the future like it was something we had the right to design. I sat on a bench and tried to remember what that had felt like, being sure. When my phone buzzed, I expected it to be Liam. But it wasn't. It was Emily, my oldest friend. Heard about you and Paul. Coffee? I stared at the message, then typed. I'd like that. Because maybe what I needed right now wasn't another man. Maybe it was myself. I didn't go back to Liam's that night. Emily and I sat in her warm, quiet kitchen, a space that smelled like cinnamon and lavender and years of shared secrets. She poured me a glass of wine before I even asked.
No judgment.
No advice. Just presence. So, she said eventually, pushing a bowl of almonds toward me. How bad is it? I stared into my glass, then gave her the bare bones. Paul and I were over. Liam was the one I'd left him for. And now? Now I didn't know. Emily didn't blink. I always wondered if Paul was really what you wanted, she said. I looked at her, surprised. We were married 23 years.
Yeah.
And for the last 10, you looked like someone just trying to hold her breath. I didn't argue, because maybe she was right. That night, I slept in Emily's guest room under a floral comforter, listening to the soft hum of her dishwasher down the hall. It felt oddly safe. In the morning, Liam had texted.
I'm sorry.
I panicked. I deleted her number. I sent the email. Please come home. Home, he said. I stared at the word for a long time. Was it his place now? Was that home? Or had I started to believe that I didn't need one fixed address anymore, that maybe I could belong to myself again? Still, I owed him an answer. And I needed to say things out loud. We met in the park, where the air still held a faint edge of spring. He brought 2 coffees and sat beside me on a bench that creaked under our combined weight. I meant what I said, he began. I want you. All of you.
No secrets.
No past pulling at me. I nodded. I believe you. He seemed surprised. But, I said gently, wanting me isn't enough. He was quiet. I reached for his hand, but not to hold it, just to feel it once more. His warmth, the roughness of his thumb, the familiar weight of him, so quickly imprinted into my nervous system. I needed you, I continued. Back then, when everything inside me felt dull and aging and invisible, I needed to be looked at the way you looked at me that night at the lake house. His mouth twitched at the memory. You were wearing that stupid flannel shirt, barefoot, with a wine glass in one hand and an attitude in the other. I laughed softly. And you had that look, like you wanted me and didn't care what it meant. I did want you, he said, voice quiet. I know, but now I need something else. He leaned back. Someone else? No, I said truthfully. Just space.
Breath.
Time to be alone. To find out who I am when I'm not someone's wife or lover or project. He exhaled slowly, like something inside him was deflating. Is this forever? I don't know, I admitted. But I think it has to be for now. We didn't kiss goodbye. We didn't cry. We just sat there, watching the wind stir the branches overhead, until it became too cold to sit still. Back at my own place, a rented 2-bedroom with good light and bad plumbing, I opened all the windows. I lit a candle, unpacked a box of books I'd avoided for months, and played music that didn't remind me of anyone but myself. Days passed. Then weeks. Spring deepened into early summer. My hair grew longer. My skin darker. I started walking more, not to get anywhere, but just to feel the rhythm of my own body moving through space. Paul emailed once. A polite note, wishing me well.
No bitterness.
Just a kind farewell from a man who had, despite it all, loved me as best he could. I replied with gratitude. No mention of Liam.
No explanations.
Some things didn't need to be revisited. One evening, Liam showed up outside my building. He didn't come in. He just stood there in a blue button-down and jeans, holding a small pot of rosemary. My favorite. I'm not here to change your mind, he said when I opened the door. Just wanted to see your face. So I let him. We talked for a bit about nothing, really. The weather.
His job.
A new show we'd both liked. Then, as he turned to leave, he looked back. I meant it, you know. I still do. If you ever decide you want to try again, I'll be around. I smiled. Not the smile of a woman swept off her feet, but the kind you give to someone you've known too well to lie to. Take care of yourself, Liam. I will, he said. I watched him walk away, and didn't chase him. That night, I made pasta with lemon and garlic, poured myself a glass of wine, and ate alone on my small balcony while the city murmured around me. I watched the sky darken, the stars blinking through one by one, like shy witnesses. I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't elated, either. But I felt something stronger than either of those things. I felt clear. Maybe the affair hadn't been a mistake. Maybe it had been exactly what it needed to be, a detour that brought me back to myself. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone else to tell me I mattered. I already knew. And that, I realized, was the real affair. Not with Liam. Not with desire. But with freedom. And this time, I had no intention of cheating on it.